one of the things that I have come to believe is that humans have created two very dramatically different visions. One I call the vision of a world that works for all. And the other is the vision of a world that works for all the good guys. And there is a big schism between these two visions. Because a world that works for all, which is in deep essence the fundamental reverence for life, has essentially an infinite circle of care. If you want the world to work for all, you need to care for all. And a world that works for all the good guys is rooted in scarcity thinking. There isn't going to be enough for all, and therefore I have to care for mine, for what is good, control everything that is bad, take it out of sight, kill it if necessary, punish it if killing isn't the ultimate thing, but somehow move everything that isn't aligned with my vision to the banished area of life. That logic, paradoxically, also exists within those of us who have a vision of a world that works for all. Because fundamentally we're saying, I'm looking for a world that works for all, except for the people who don't believe in a world that works for all. So when we make that move, we are actually reenacting the same script. So, and where do I see it in what you're saying? It's very subtle and small, innocent looking. How do we get people to change their view? The moment, it's so humbling. I mean, I am not exempting myself from what you're saying. It's just that it's sometimes I can see the hubris in that, and then I come back to humility. I don't actually know. I don't know anything. I don't even know that I am right, that the thing to do is to create a world that works for all. I don't even know that. I believe in it very strongly, but I don't actually know that. So if I bring humility, curiosity, care, open-heartedness to my conversation with the person, I have much more of a chance of getting somewhere together. I once had a conversation with a Tea Party activist. This is about, I don't know, like 9 years ago, when the Tea Party was very active in the United States. Precursor to Donald Trump. And the two things stand out to me from that conversation that I remember 9 years later. One is, I was born and raised in Israel. He was born and raised in Estonia. I think that was the country that he came from. He was older than me by 10, 15 years. We both went to live in the United States. And it turned out that as children, we both loved the same author. A German author that I think is not known in the United States. His name is Karl May, and he wrote about, about Native Americans. In my memory from all these decades later, I think he was, quite benign in relation to them and didn't paint them as bad. It was, interesting and rich. I don't know if I would think that now with all I know now, but that is aside. Suddenly there was this very strange commonality, a random commonality that was, I think, reminded both of us that we are both humans in some fundamental ways that are similar. It made it impossible to treat each other as other. That's one thing that stands out to me. The other is a bit more complex, which is he, of course, pegged me as a liberal, which I don't peg myself as a liberal. I don't peg myself as any label other than feminist and committed to nonviolence. Those are my only two labels. But that aside, and pegging me as a liberal, he believed me to be one of those people who think that state intervention is the solution to problems. And so we ended up having a conversation about that. I entered the whole conversation without intending to say anything to him, only to hear. And then I learned something that shifted my view on something, not his, mine. What I learned is that both conservatives and liberals have a limited view of human nature. That the conservatives don't believe that people would do anything without incentives, that we are not motivated enough, and therefore you have to have all these incentives. And the liberals have a different picture of that. They don't believe we will take care of each other on our own. We need government to do it for us. And suddenly, and it turns out, I haven't researched it carefully, but it turns out that in certain ways, there's more charity giving among conservatives than among liberals. That is interesting. Why don't we think about what makes that so? And so it helped me, kind of like destabilize, neatly packaging people into groups with certain characteristics, and coming into a place of much more humility about what things mean. I didn't follow up to have more conversation with him. And so I only have this little bit, but it left me very deeply moved and micro-transformed. Second thing is that, I don't know, maybe it's the third thing, but one more thing that I want to say is there is a philosopher, a Scottish philosopher called Alistair MacIntyre, and he talks about something that he calls an epistemological crisis. It sounds very highfalutin. I will explain what it means. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that deals with knowing, with knowledge. How do we acquire knowledge? How do we know that something is something we know or not, etc.? An epistemological crisis can simply be described as, if this is true, this new thing that I just discovered, if this is true, then everything else that I've ever believed is not true. Those of us who come out of mainstream thinking can probably point to moments in our life when we had that experience. It's tough. It's not easy. My best example of it is not relevant to this story, but the phenomenon is so important that I want to talk about it, which is I was visiting a friend's father who was dying of pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer in Western medicine is a death sentence. And I was there with a friend, and when we left, I said to her, I don't understand something. Western medicine has nothing to offer him. What has he got to lose from trying other things? There is anecdotal evidence of other things that help with pancreatic cancer. I don't know if they work or not, but what has he got to lose? And she said he has his entire worldview to lose. Especially since, then she told me, he himself was a physician, a medical doctor. So he would have that to lose. And the gaping hole that is open when everything you have always believed in suddenly is destabilized, it's very hard. So if we know that, then rather than challenging people, I want to find a way to offer a combination of gentle holding and confrontation, not just the confrontation. The confrontation will not do this. So it's gentle holding, togetherness, offering the togetherness. It's like if you're going to walk away from where you are, I'm here. You're not going to have to do this journey on your own. How many of us actually have it to offer people we disagree with strongly? Most of us don't. But when a rabbi, a cantor, and his wife moved to the south of the United States and started getting threatening calls from the Ku Klux Klan. And this is a true story. It's written up. There's a book about it. There's a podcast. It's called Not by the Sword. And they tracked down the number. They called and left a message of love. And they did it every week. After a few months, they got a call from the guy who was leaving the death threats, who was a retired Grand Dragon or whatever, I don't know the ranking within the Ku Klux Klan system, diabetic in a wheelchair. He called them and said, I want to talk, I need your help. They connected. And he ended up spending the last year of his life living in their basement. They took him in. His friends, his former colleagues did not take him in. They took him in. He was in their basement, and the last year of his life, he was making amends for all the harm that he had done before. So, sure, it's like an unusual story. It's one of a kind. But does it have to be one of a kind? Or is this the time where we can do more of this? Where those of us who grasp togetherness, non-separation, caring for the whole, where we can exit our bubble and make our world more inviting. I don't know the answer, but it's a question.